Well, hello, Robert. I'm joined by Robert Bagnall, one of the authors in Obsidian. So you'll have a novelette that I have chosen to include in my anthology, Obsidian, which viewers should be aware is an anthology full of longer reads, all centering on space exploration, isolation, alienation, and just generally quite a bleak thing. Um, I was I was inspired by minerals and wanted to find the blackest of black because I thought space is quite black really, and I thought obsidian is a lovely word to describe how black something can be, and I thought, you know what, that could be a series. So I'm doing a series called Minerals, and the next one's going to be Pyrite. But so Robert Bagnall, you were one of your story actually
I'm the
kicks off
opening
the
story.
anthology.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, lead story. So, this is the ambassadors. So, is
Yes.
this a story that you had in mind before you read the call for submissions?
Yeah, I mean, full disclosure, I suspect, like a lot of writers of short fiction, we have a big bag of stories that we're working on, have sent out, had feedback on. I think this one is a bit unusual. It hadn't been out too many times. I'm probably making life difficult for myself by writing something of that length because it's a very hard length of story to sell. There's lots of markets out there for your sub 1,000 word stories. You go
Lots of
into any
flash.
bookshop and the bookshelves are full of 100,000 word stories. Um, Unless you are successful in pitching something to the Clarkesworlds and Asimovs of this world, um, and I keep sending them stuff and they keep sending it back. I don't quite know what it is I'm doing wrong. It can be a bit hard to convince somebody of something of this length. Plus, I was trying to do something structurally a bit unusual in this. And without wanting to be sort of too cultural about it, I do find American publishers, if you don't send them something that hits all the marks, is a bit cookie cutter. It's hard to get it past them quite often. You need somebody a bit more free thinking and creative to appreciate where maybe what this story is trying to do slightly different, if you like.
That sounds like us at the Slab Press. We are quirkier sorts
Absolutely,
of
yeah.
books.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, so it's something that you had already written, and so you saw my call, and I was like,
Mm,
I was looking for something, a little bit like space horror, Event Horizon,
yeah.
like, Solaris, that kind of thing, Sunshine, and the Ambassadors. I think there's a lot of character driven, um story here, isn't there, as well?
Mm.
So it's not necessarily about space itself, it's about the interaction of the characters. So what is it that you anchored your story on?
Well, the story, I mean, just to introduce it starts off with a high risk secret diplomatic mission in a faster than light shuttle going from Earth to some planet out there in the blackness. Something goes wrong on it. They're not quite sure what. It could be just a bit of space dust that they've hit faster than light, and that leads to this near-death situation. It does look like they're all going to die. It's told through the eyes of a young aide called Amrata, who wants to become what's called a First Blood ambassador. And to be a First Blood ambassador, you've got to make first contact with an alien species. So they're stranded in space. Looks like they're all about to die when they come across a derelict spacecraft, which somehow they make their way into. And at that point, it does all go very strange, and it's not quite sure who's rescuing who. So, in terms of a character driven thing, there's only, God, let me get this right, there's only 5 characters in there, plus the alien entities. I don't want to say too much. It started off as an
Mm.
exercise in trying to write a ghost story in space and indeed sending it out to other markets. The feedback I was getting was, well, if you want to write sci-fi, write sci-fi. If you want to write a ghost story, write a ghost story. And I just thought, I think you can switch between lanes here. You can have a ghost story in space. You can have a genre mashup. But as I say, I think we're living in very conservative times from the point of view of a writer. I don't know whether it's true from a publisher, but people they're far less risk taking than they were. And I think a ghost story in space isn't that much of a risk, in all honesty. But I'm glad it's found a home, and it's found a home quite quickly, really.
Oh, great, thanks.
Mm,
I wouldn't have thought that it would be such a niche
mm,
kind of thing with ghost stories. That I'm seeing a lot of stories at the moment where people are looking at ghosts, but in different lights. So, for example, if you take Lorraine Wilson's novel, The Salt Oracle, which is such a genre-bending novel, it's amazing,
mm,
and that covers lots of different kinds of things, including science fiction, fantasy, myth, and there are digital ghosts in that. And so, like, I'm seeing other things as well where ghosts are not the normal kind of
mm.
paranormal ghost that we're used to. And
Yeah.
I think because we have this sense of what is unheimlich, what is uncanny, and things that just give us the little bit of a creep, that it's not enough for it to just be some monster
Yeah.
or like remnant. We have to find that humanity in there or entity of some other kind. So what is reflected back at us from this ghost? What is it we are
Mm,
discovering in it and ourselves? So yeah, that was my thinking on it.
mm.
What is it about space that you feel is a good milieu for a ghost story?
Um, yeah, I knew you'd ask me about space, obviously. And actually, I took a look at the stories that I've written and haven't sold, and written and have sold. And in terms of the stories I've sold, it's less than 15% are set in space. And of the stories that I have on my list to go out, it's less than 10%. I don't tend to write a lot in space. Which has made me wonder. I describe myself as a science fiction writer. Am I really a science fiction writer? I'm a more speculative, slipstream, um, what have you. But I mean, to take the space bit first before the ghost bit. I think one of the curses of the modern world is that we've explored the entire surface of the world. So we can't have one of those bobbing around on the ocean waves coming across some new bit of land, some, terra nova that we then go and explore. It just doesn't work anymore. So a lot of space stories or space set stories, they're really just nautical stories. Finding new land.
Mm,
Star Trek, it's a ship. It could easily be, the USS Enterprise on water. It just happens to be because of the time period it's set. You need to set it in space to find new places. Um, so
boldly
I th
go.
yeah, I think that is what space is. Space is the canvas on which we paint. It's not. I don't know how. I don't really have a lot to say about space itself. It's big and it's a vacuum and it's cold and it's scary and I don't really want much to do with it in a way. But in terms of ghosts in space, yeah, I mean, there is, in the same way that you can come across the haunted mansion out there in the woods and you're lost and alone and the chances of escape are minimized. I mean, that works tenfold in space. You come across a derelict spacecraft, you go exploring, maybe it's alien that you find, maybe
Mm.
it's and I mean, I've said I started off writing a ghosts in space story. It kind of mutated into something, I think, a bit more sci-fi than a straight sort of sci-fi fantasy mashup. But it's that kind of thing. You want your characters to have limited lines of escape, limited lines of communication. And space is a really great place to have that. I mean, just as an aside, I had another story I published quite a few years ago. I'm trying to think. I think it might have been Daily Science Fiction. No, it was Wild Blood, another great British publishing institution or science fiction institution who published it. And that was three guys and a cat trapped in an escape capsule. And while before rescue, the cat develops the ability to speak. It makes the next evolutionary step up. But as soon as the cover is popped off it, the cat becomes a cat again. And yes, it's a bit hard to explain exactly what happened in that capsule during that time. So again, it's the same thing, lines of communication cut off and lines of escape minimized.
I say I'm a sucker for cat stories as well, so we'll have to seek that one out.
Oh, I'll
Not
send you a
that,
link.
yeah, thank you. So you have been published a few times, I think, in Best of British Science Fiction as well.
Indeed, thank you for
So
that.
you've got quite, I would say, would you describe yourself as a prolific writer? Are you constantly subbing, that kind of
I
thing?
am constantly subbing, certainly. I'm writing a lot of the time. I saw, and I don't know how many people who will see this are coming at it from the point of view of readers, and how many are coming at it from the point of writers or even wannabe writers. Um, Somebody described it once as being like fishing. You keep throwing the bait out, you keep throwing the bait out, and occasionally you get a bite and you pull back in. So yes, I mean, I, I, I like to have on average at the end of the year at least a submission a day. Um, you know,
Wow.
yeah, I mean, you send stuff up. A lot of the time, as you know, it's not to do with whether the stuff is good enough, because I'm sure you see more stuff than that meets a quality
Yeah.
criterion than you can publish. It's a
Mm.
case of how does it fit in with the other things the editor's seeing? How does it, just does it chime or not? Um, so, I might get one bite for every 15 or 20 submissions. I know it's not because one story out of 15 or 20 is good enough. It's just, does it fit in with that edition of whatever I'm sending it to? So, you've got to kiss a lot of frogs, as they say.
Yeah, I must admit that I thought because there were so many different stories that I really wanted to include, but I did not want to make a more traditional anthology where it's like short stories, or you have about 20 stories
Yeah.
in an anthology, and that makes something about the same size. I
Mm,
wanted them to be longer reads.
yes.
I did think I would have a little um, thing at the back where I've got a kind of like a highly commended list. And this isn't everybody I've been really positive about. So
Mm,
like I've said, oh, I really loved your story to a lot of people, and what I may have like preferred there to have been, or why I couldn't necessarily take it. But there were some that I just thought, oh, these are stories are amazing. So I have included a little highly commended list. I think you'll need to buy a copy of this for me to reveal that. But yeah, other authors.
yeah.
Because there's like if you'll read that story elsewhere, you'll see I had it first, and I nearly took it,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. But yeah, so this is good. So you sound like a very disciplined writer. Is what 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 are your long-term ambitions then with this? Is it just to have a lot of short fiction out there, or are you planning on longer fiction?
I mean, I've written, I've had published one novel that was called 2084, The
Mm.
Mashira Bandwidth, which is still out there. It was published by a Canadian e-publisher called Double Dragon. They folded a few years ago. I've got my own label called William Holly, which I do consultancy through, but I also publish sci-fi confusingly. So I do publish my own stuff under that label, but I don't regard it as vanity publishing because I only publish things that other people have published. They've been verified as being good enough to be published by others. So when the rights come back to me, um, so I've put together two collections of short stories, one called 24 Noughts and a Two, and the other called my what's it called? My thoughts are your my thoughts are with you. your thoughts are with the authorities for calibration against societal norms. I've completely forgotten the name of that title. The next one, the planned title is The Lucky Ones Will Be Replaced by Software. So um, each one
Oh,
collects about 24 stories that have been published in the past. Hopefully, that third volume, if I get round to it, will come out later this year. Um, I mean, in terms of discipline, yeah, I mean, I just like writing. I I do have a novel that actually the novel is a continuation of the first story you picked up of mine for the best of British science fiction back in 2016, I think it was. So the story was published in 2016, your anthology published in 2017, which just brings home the fact I've been working on it now for the best part of a decade, extending it.
mm.
I've almost got a first draft of the novel, but that extends the story of the penguin chickens in Afghanistan, which I'm sure you've seen many stories since. But yeah, so I'm working on that, but I get far too distracted. I think I found myself in a state once where I was being distracted from the novel by writing a 10,000 word story, and I got distracted from that writing a 1,000 word story, and got distracted from that writing a 100 word drabble. So there's a sort of gravitational pull that I suffer from back to the short form. So I end up writing far more short form than long stories.
Yeah, I think I recognised that. As you said, planning two novels at once and not writing either of them because
Yeah.
she's too busy editing. Um,
Yes.
so, what is it else? What else distracts you from writing, would you say?
Um, well, I mean, working. I mean, I'm in a very lucky position. I'm a freelancer, so I can, chop and change my time. It's the sort of freelancing job where I'm sitting at a laptop anyway. So I might, have a meeting with a client, do some work, then flip back to writing. Or if I have a couple of hours between meetings, I've got time to write. It's a privileged position, and I'm fully appreciate that. Um, so I mean, I'm not really distracted from writing so much as, how can I put it? I, I don't. One of the things that I don't need to write. I'm not one of these writers that if I don't have another novel out in 6 months, then there won't be food on the table. So I have the ability to write what I want to write. If the ideas aren't coming, and I've got a sort of long list of about 50 ideas, so there's always something to fall back on, or I just don't feel like writing. I don't. So I think by not pushing it too much, I do have that sort of constant and continual output.
Well, that sounds great. I mean, how do you keep note of all your ideas? Are they really strong ideas that basically just stay in your head, or do you have to get a
Yeah,
pretty notebook to write them
no,
down?
no, I'm not. I live my life by spreadsheets, and I've got a spreadsheet, with all the publishers that I'm sending to, all the stories, and I've got a column in there just of one or two, 1 or 2 sentences. Although, I mean, I do have a file, a Word file, which has nothing in it other than my sort of top and tail of a story. So, you know, name and email and number of words at the top and a by. And the file is just called Time Travel Garden Shed. And I have no recollection what this story was going to be, other than probably a rip-off of, um, Hot Tub Time Machine. But yeah, I mean, it's just that's just the file name, and I have no recollection where this story was going. It sort of sits at the bottom of my list of files as the one that has been, had work done on it. I might as well just delete it. It's just clogging up the system, really. But apart from that, no, it's a 1 or 2. I think one of the things is when you're writing a short story, it's a bit like a joke. As long as you have that punchline noted down, then you remember the rest of it. You can get to the end of it. So I just have that sort of the point of the. Yeah, I mean, I know you do stand-up comedy, so you might disagree. I know you've got to hone
The
the
punchlines are the bits I struggle with.
yeah, you hone the setup. But I think as long as you know just one line in there. I mean, just to if anyone wants to have this, one of my prompts is what is it, £3 note. Um, I know just by looking at that note, looking at those words, what the story was going to be, or maybe will still be. Somebody goes back in time, changes time. Have they got away with it? And they think they've got away with it until they pull a £3 note out of their pocket. That was going to be the story. I mean, there's probably not enough material there for more than a thousand words, but you know, a short note, and I probably wrote that note 3, 5 years ago. Haven't done anything with it yet, but you know, I know where it might go.
Mm. Like I say, I'm a sucker for using OneNote because there's like a scrapbook, so you can attach
Mm,
documents in there, or just take some notes, or put in a little picture.
yeah.
Um, but like I say, it's going back in there and having a look at things I've already written down. There's lots of scrapbooks we've got
Oh
going.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is it that you've got planned for the future? What is in the pipeline?
What is in the pipeline? There are a few things coming out. So I'm in the next third Flatiron anthology, which is called Sci-Fi to Go Food for Thought. Um, I've got some drabbles coming out in under Shacklebound, who I'd say it's a publisher who's taken quite a few, you know, really short things, though they seem to specialize in drabbles. I've got a story coming out at some stage from the or under the British Fantasy Society sort of banner called The Adventures of the Sekaratu Club, which is a this is another absolutely foolish move. I wrote a Sherlock Holmes story because Sherlock Holmes is now in the public domain. You can do that.
Yeah.
But even, and this was for, um, I really shouldn't tell this story. There was an anthology, a submission call came out for retellings of stories from the point of view of classical heroines. Um, so I did a story from the point of view of Irene or Irene Adler, depending on how you want to pronounce her name from the Sherlock Holmes books, and then sent it off and got the email address wrong. So I was watching on the submissions grinder as you know everyone else had their submissions rejected or a few accepted, and mine was still under consideration. Um, and it got to the stage where I contacted the publisher, and they went, "Oh no, never got it." So I looked back at the email and
Oh
I'd got
no.
the bloody email wrong. So yeah, it was a bit hard to convince people, even if when I said to people Sherlock Holmes is in the public domain, they went, "Oh no, it's a bit too fanfic." But British Fantasy Society have come forward for that one, and that's coming out soon. And I also have a story called Sidekick coming out in what's called the Big Book of Quantum Fiction at some point. The submission instructions were please don't send a time travel story in. So I sent a time travel story in, but convinced them. So it made it over the bar. I've got no idea when that's coming out, but there's some of
Okay.
the things for
Mhm.
2026.
Okay. And are you planning to go to any conventions? I'm a bit of a convention goer myself.
I know I should. Yeah, I don't have any planned. I'm down in Devon, and I know you know
A long
Bristol
way to
is.
go from there.
Yeah, they tend to be elsewhere. Bristol's fairly accessible to us, but
Mm.
no, I'm one of those sort of shy, hermetically sealed sort of writers who sits tapping away and just sends things out on the internet. But I know I ought to. It's good developmental practice and career expanding or whatever the phrase is. But no, I wish you well at the ones you're attending.
Yeah, thank you. Devon sounds like a very inspirational place to live. Would you say?
It is actually. I discovered when I looked at an old copy of Writers and Artists Yearbook that I live on the same road as or she was one of Britain's premier science fiction agents, but I think she died about the year that I moved here. So
Oh no.
it could have been so good. I could have just wandered around there, knocked on her door with a pile of manuscripts, but no,
She'd have loved that.
our paths never crossed. It's yeah, no, but no, Devon is lovely. Bit grey today, but generally lovely.
Okay, well, as I say, that's your story, The Ambassadors in
Mm,
Obsidian, and we'll have other events going on with this book. And
indeed.
it just leaves me to say thank you very much, Robert Bagnall, for joining me today and discussing your story and your inspirations.
And thank you very much for your support, not just with this story, but with several others.
Okay, thank you.